Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to offer you some reflections on the gospel of this first Sunday of Advent. And Advent has begun. And as in the years before, so now we are going to be spending the next 4 weeks preparing ourselves for the coming of Christ, for God entering into this world at Christmas. And Advent begins with Jesus in the gospel striking a somewhat unsettling note. We hear him saying to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert. You don't know when the time will come. Watch, therefore. You don't know when the Lord of the house is returning, whether it's in the evening or at midnight or in the morning. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you is, watch." For what? For what? The end of the world, the second coming of Christ? You know, Jesus, if you're trying to scare me half to death, mission accomplished. Those could be fearful words to hear, but Jesus is not trying to scare us into being better disciples at all. What he is trying to do is focus us on the present moment, to do something especially for we Americans that is so hard to do, and that is to live in the here and the now and not in the future. And I say it's hard for us because we are a very future oriented people. We live in the future. As soon as our children are born, we start saving up for their college fund. And the people in their 20s and 30s are already with their 401ks trying to prepare for their retirement, which may not happen for another 30 or 40 years. We live in the future. We buy insurance for our houses, our cars, our health, preparing to get ready for some future calamity that might occur. So we live there. And Jesus is saying to us, be alert, be watchful, that God lives in the present. He doesn't live in the future. He doesn't live in the past. He can only be found in the present moment. And so look for him there. So we begin Advent, almost ironically, not thinking about the future, Christmas, but really focusing upon discovering God in the here and the now, because that's discovery can lead to revelation, that leads to transformation. So where do I find God in the here and the now? I'd like to offer you, for your thoughts, one place to look for God, and that is in our poverty. What is my poverty? And by poverty, I don't mean being poor. I mean it the way the Trappist monk Thomas Merton meant it when he was writing about the vow of poverty that he had taken, where he had given all of his wealth, all of his possessions to his religious community. But he wrote, that isn't really poverty, because if I needed a new pair of shoes, I could go to the abbot. He would give me the money. I would go buy the shoes. That's not true poverty. Merton said true poverty is I don't have shoes. There is no money at all to buy new shoes. And in fact, there are no shoes to buy. That's poverty. That I live life no longer possessing something which I once did, or perhaps never did and deserved to. And there is no replacing it. The poverty that I'm talking about is the poverty of a parent that loses a child to death. And nothing is going to replace that child. Nothing can. Not the love of a spouse, not the love of another child. They once had that child which had been taken from them, and they now live their life without that which they had once possessed and can never have back. That is poverty. The poverty a child might have who grows up without a parent because the parent wasn't present or maybe it died. And now that child goes through life without that dad that one day might walk them down the aisle, or without that mom that you might want to come home to and cry on her shoulder. Nothing will ever be able to take the place of that absent parent. No surrogate will ever be able to replace them. That is their poverty. And they live their life without that which they maybe once had and no longer will, no longer can. The poverty that comes from someone who now has contracted a chronic disease and their health is gone now and it's never returning, and they will spend the rest of their life, as long as they have it, battling with this illness. I think of this priest I knew who had Parkinson's disease, and for more than 20 years of his life, every day, living and battling with this disease that slowly was whittling away his life. That was his poverty. Or the poverty that can come when there is a divorce that happens, and maybe one person didn't want the divorce, but it's thrust upon them. And now they have divided family, and now they have kids that can't decide who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, and this whole new life is on them, and the life they had before is over, and nothing is ever going to bring it back together again. That's their poverty. What is my poverty? And in discovering that, we can find ourselves dealing with that poverty and having so much bitterness about it. Because maybe I didn't deserve this sickness. I didn't deserve this kind of divorce. I didn't deserve this life. It's not fair. It's not right. And we can find ourselves complaining to God and wanting Him to make this poverty go away. But remember, God entered into this world through poverty. He was born in a stable of very poor parents who lived in a very poor city in an out-of-the-way country. God chose to enter into this world in the midst of poverty, because it can be in the midst of poverty that we most clearly can see the presence of God and how He is calling us to live our life in a way we never dreamed of before, had this poverty not come upon us. So, in this first week of Advent, as we are attentive to the presence of God in the here and the now, maybe we ask ourselves, where is my poverty? And in that, we look for God, and I perhaps will discover the God that I have spent all my life waiting for.